there you have, I think, a pretty decent storage box. So welcome to the second of my DIY projects, things which you can undertake, ideally with stuff you've got lying around maybe in the shed or the garage. And again, I'm looking for projects which I don't think you need to have too much DIY experience to be able to do. And of course, do subscribe to the video and like the video as well. So what am I going to do in this particular project? Well, I'm just thinking what's happening at the moment. Lots of people in lots of small places, and one of the things that's going to be an issue is storage for all those bits and pieces which you're going to be generating. So why don't we have a go at creating a storage box? I'm going to try and create something which looks a bit more, well, like the kind of thing that you'd actually be quite happy to have as a piece of furniture. You might not think that's going to be possible out of what I've got here in terms of raw materials, but I'm going to prove to you that it is possible, even with the stuff I've got here. As a starting point, this is quite a simple project. Compared to putting up a shelf, it's a piece of cake. Famous last words, of course. We are going to use some scraps of timber. So the first thing I'm going to do is decide on the size of the box. And again, these are just bits of wood that I had lying around. That's chipboard. It's made of basically wood that's been smunched up and then glued back together and squished into a big flat thing. Very, very strong. Much nicer wood in terms of how you can finish it off is this. This is called plywood, and you can see, or plyboard, you can see the different layers of the wood in there. And it's basically thin layers of wood, which are glued together with a high strength glue. That's going to form the top and the bottom of my box. And then this, which is just this mangy old bit of, I don't know, I think it's a plank of some sort. But again, it's natural wood, a bit manky, but I reckon we can use that to create the sides of the box. So that's what we've got. So we've got some bits of wood. Now, I'm going to make a fairly good sized box. So about 1/2 metre by 1/2 metre like that, and about 25 centimetres tall. Obviously, you can vary it depending on the wood you've got. So if you've got more wood, you want to make it slightly bigger, then you just alter the sizes. So you can basically make it to wherever you like. So we've got our bits of wood there. We've then got our trusty bits and pieces. We've got the sanding discs. We've got a box of drills and screw bits, which we're going to need. We've got our set square, 90 degrees, and it's also got, what's this called? A ruler, that's it. A ruler. I've got another ruler there, a trusty tape measure, some sanding pads. Last time, if you remember, we went on to the concept of sanding pads with various different levels of coarseness. We've got a box of screws, and then finally, over here, the choices of things we've got to actually finish off the project. So once we've done it, we could do all sorts of things. We could paint it with all different sorts of paint. A wood paint obviously is going to be very important. You could think about dyeing it with a wood dye. You can polish it. Perhaps it's something we've done before, or something which is very trendy at the moment. You might want to consider using something called chalk finish furniture paint, which will give it a really interesting kind of look. And old-fashioned things like varnish. So various options there for what we might want to use in terms of putting on the wood when it's finished. But first of all, let's give you an idea of the general concept. I'm going to create a box. It's not exactly difficult, this. And then I'm going to cut my pieces of wood. So there's one piece of wood going down here, another piece of wood going down there, another piece of wood going down there, and I'm going to screw through here to hold those pieces of wood in place. And then I'm going to screw this way along those pieces of wood to give a bit more strength, and then this thing is going to go on the top. So in this instance, with this construction method, I'm going to make sure that the two pieces of wood are the same size. Now, clearly if I was adopting a different piece of a different way of constructing, which could be to put a piece of wood along the edge there and screw it onto that side, on each side, which might look neater because then you don't get this edge, then I could do that. And in which case this piece of wood would have to be smaller than this piece of wood. But using the construction technique I'm going for, which I think is slightly stronger, even though it's not quite as pretty, I think this is going to be the way to go. So basically, the trick is in getting your bits and pieces ready. The assembly is going to be really, really quick. I'm not going to do the assembly though till tomorrow, because this is quite exciting, because you will have seen, by the time you've seen this, perhaps this exact project on the Jeremy Vine Show on Channel 5. So we're limited by the smaller of the pieces of wood. Now annoyingly, one of them's long that way and thinner that way, and the other one's thicker that way and shorter. So we're going to have to be doing a bit of cutting, so we want them to be identical sizes. Line up the edges. Now I am assuming that these pieces of wood are square, but you know what, the great thing about this is a bit like homemade baking. Your scones don't have to be perfect, all right? So as long as we're roughly in the right ballpark. So that will mean that that is the same distance that way as that one, and then this piece obviously correspondingly needs to have a cut down in size to fit there. So in theory, if I cut that piece like that and that piece like that, we'll have two pieces of wood the same size. So let's do that. So always wearing your protective goggles, a nice stable work surface. One piece done, and then this piece. Now I did say last time, it's really important if you're cutting what's called MDF, which is similar to this, but the fibres are a little bit finer, that you're very careful you're wearing a face mask when you're doing this. So let's put one on for this. Right, so theoretically you should have two pieces of wood that are the same size. Okay, so that's a really good start. So that is going to be the top. Now it has got a bit of a bow in it. Don't know if you can see that. I'm going to call that character. Right, so this is the important one. We're going to work on this one. So now we need to know what lengths of wood we're going to need. So we are going to measure that, and that is 57.5 and 52. So 57.5 and 52. So we need to do a bit of working out now. So we're going to cut two bits of this wood, which are going to go along the whole of this length. So they need to be 57.5. So we need two 57.5s of this wood here. With my tape measure, 57.5. Now there is an old adage, which is probably the most important thing when it comes to cutting wood. And that is measure twice, cut once. Now I could do the whole thing and measure all the way down, but the problem is I don't know how much the blade is going to take off, and people often forget about the width of the blade, which is literally a couple of millimetres, but if you're doing fine construction work, then that can make all the difference in the world. So let's chop that off. First one, and then we need another 57.5. We're now going to take those two bits of wood and we're going to place them on here to give you the idea of what we're going to do. So those two bits of wood are going to sit like that and like that. Now what we need to do is we need to work out the lengths of the other bits of wood. I could do that basically by measuring that distance, which we said was 52, and then because I want these two bits of wood to sit inside these other bits of wood, I've got to allow the thickness of that wood, and that wood is 2 and a bit centimetres. But the great thing about doing it like this is I can put those there and I can do a bit of a sense check and go, yeah, that looks like that'll be really weird. I know why it is, because that's actually 2.5 centimetres. That's 2.5 plus 2.5, which is 5. 52 minus 5 is 47. It's always worth checking that the piece of wood that you build this from is as long as it needs to be to do everything you need to do, which in this case it is, because I planned it that way. Right, so 47, 47, And 47. Right, now theoretically, although the way things have been going I'm not so sure, this will all fit. Shorter bits. Look at that. And then hopefully this little fella will go on the top, and you can imagine with a little hinge on that, and by the time I've cleaned this up, that is going to be a really great box. Now the next thing to do is to prepare this to be screwed together. So what we're going to do, if you might remember from last time, we're actually going to drill a pilot hole because we want to make sure that this screws together without splitting the wood. So I'm going to drill into here 3 holes and put a screw through there. So let's just drill a few of those. That's one side. Before I do this actually, small point, I want to clean off the faces. I want to clean off the ones that haven't got dark brown orbital on them. So I am going to actually put the rough side, surprisingly, to the outside. Do that again. Stating the blindly obvious, you want to make sure that the drill size is smaller than the size of the screw. So it will still bite. Is it going to be drilled? So now finally what I'm going to do is I need to drill that piece of wood there. So, and I've got the interesting task of turning it over. This is going to be impossible. Oh, really? Now, the alternative way of doing this, of course, is to fasten these together first and then place that on the top. That might be an easy thing to do. Right, carry on with this tomorrow. And breathe. Sometimes it's a really good thing to put down a project and leave it and go away and think about it. Maybe you're approaching it in the wrong kind of way. Now, clearly, what I was doing yesterday just wasn't going to work. If I'd carried on, I would have just got so frustrated, I would have hit something with a hammer, and that wouldn't have been good. So I'm going to sand this off, and I think it's a lot easier to sand it off now, in fact sand everything off now, rather than later. Electric cable and my handy palm sander. So what do? Mask on, glasses on, and we have to go and get a cup of coffee probably. So that's probably the hardest bit of the whole job, to be honest, preparing the wood, but a lot easier to do with flat bits of timber like that rather than afterwards. So I now have my tidied bits of wood. Now look, I could have spent a lot more time sanding those, but I quite like this sort of weathered look. I mean, it takes a long time for wood to get like that, you know, even on these mangy old bits of wood that were just lying around. Look at this. I spent a lot of time on this surface because this is going to be the top of the box. In terms of finishing this off, there's lots of choices which you could do. What I'm going to do is I actually do like natural wood, so I'm going to stick with stuff called Danish oil. Meanwhile, back with the plan. I said I'd come up with overnight a better idea, and that is actually to assemble it first. We need to get it like this, and let's just get one screw in there. Now I'm using a 50mm screw here. It's a 4x50. Got about maybe 2 centimetres, it's going to protrude into the wood. But let's just put a screw in here. What we can do is we can put another one in there. Right, so that's one side. So bear in mind what the side we want on the outside. Long sides, 2 long sides like that, and then the short sides in the middle. Now, I said at the start, you don't need, I don't think, to be too ultra precise about this kind of stuff. I'm not making fine furniture, okay? I'm making a practical box. So as long as it practically does what it's supposed to do, the fact the joints are a bit rough and ready, I think will be part of its charm. At least that's what I'll be telling people anyway. A couple more screws. So, there we go. Now, that seems pretty good to me. So, we're now going to put our base on it, like that. And lo and behold, by jingo, it almost fits. And again, doing things like this, you are making adjustments with your eye all the time, just to get it as best as it can be. And that, to me, looks pretty good. I'm just going to put some screws in to hold this at the bottom. So, again, pilot hole. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a couple in. I'm going to put some screws in the bottom. Certainly need more than 2 on each side of that, because this is forming the strength of the whole thing. So, I'm thinking 3 on each side, maybe 4 on the long sides. So, back with the screwdriver bit. 1 more screws. Right, so there I have the makings of my box. The only thing we've got left to do is fit the lid, which hopefully fits on there like that. So there's a variety of things. You could just leave it like that. You could put a couple of clips on it. I think what I'm going to do is I'd quite like to have it folding, because that would be pretty, wouldn't it? So basically it goes... So we need to move into the realms of hinges. So because it's quite a heavy box lid, I'm going to use a fairly substantial sized hinge. So that's what I have got here. I do notice they've got huge great holes in them as well. So my issue here is that I haven't got a screw that's that kind of thickness. So in this instance, what I think I need to do, I need to put them in with bolts. Okay, so first of all, let's work out how the hinges work. Now, all hinges are different in terms, well, not all the hinges are different, obviously, but this is called a traditional, I think it's called a butt hinge or something like that. And this is ideal for what I'm doing, because basically one side's going to go on the vertical there. I think I need to put it on the inside, don't I? So there you go. So just try it out. So you can see that's how it's going to go. Hinge is going to sit like that on the box. That one's going to sit in there like that. So this bit you really don't want to mess up, because so it's worth just double checking and triple checking. I'm probably going to measure, and I want to do it this way around so I can make sure that it's hanging over properly. So let's make the thing 10 centimetres and 10 centimetres at this end. So we've measured them. Now here's the thing, I'm often accused of hoarding stuff, but you know when you get those things from IKEA and you get these bags of bits and there's often screws left over? Well, I found these. So I might actually change my plan, because I've actually got these things which I reckon might just be perfect for this job. So what I'm going to do now is drill a hole that's just small enough to get that started. And I'm going to mark with a pencil the place where I want that hole to go. And if I'm very careful with this, I'm not actually going to drill all the way through. So let's drill very carefully, not going all the way through. This is actually going to be a much neater job than I first thought, which is good news. If I get my drill on that now and just check the size, I think I've shown you this before you put a screw in, because annoyingly screws often have different types of heads. So that's that. So and the reason why you want fairly thick screws is because these hinges, because it's quite a heavy lid, are going to take a bit of battering. So I think I might have done that wrong. I think the hinges need to be on the other way. Let's see what happens if I do it like that. As you can see, the problem I was going to have, the lid wasn't going to fit snug. That's better. That's going to go like that now. I'll go on there and that will open. Fine. So I did in fact put the hinge on the wrong way around. Flip it over. Okay. It's more like it. Line it up as best you can. Make a little mark. And again, very carefully drilling, not all the way through. Right, final piece of the puzzle. These screw bits. And it's not finished, but there you have, I think, a pretty decent storage box. So the next steps to this are finish that off however you want. You can either use, as I said previously, the chalk paint, you could wax it, you could just paint it with normal gloss paint. I'm gonna oil it with Danish oil, because I quite like the idea of something that looks a little bit nice. And at the end of the day, what has taken me, how long has that taken me? Maybe an hour in total to create something which is really, really nice. But whatever happens, you have made yourself a nifty little storage area without costing very much at all, because it's stuff that was lying around, and I think that is actually going to be a really nice addition to the house. So, have you enjoyed the video? I jolly well hope so. Make sure you like it, make sure you subscribe, make sure you tell your friends, and do get in contact if you've got any DIY jobs or ideas you've got for me. Just let me know and I'll do them for you. But for now, keep safe. There you go, a DIY tidbit.